Greetings all, and welcome to Lucas Sprues. In today's video, we're going to do an inbox review of the 1/72nd scale P-40E Kittyhawk from Hobby Boss that's part of their easy assembly range. So we'll start off by having a look at the box. As you can see on the cover here, we have the US Air Force scheme with the famous flying tiger's teeth and mouth. This one's actually, as you see on the back of the box here, from the 23rd Fighter Group, and they're basically the group who took over when the Flying Tigers, or the American Volunteer Group, was disbanded in about mid-1942. So it's sort of the group that followed on. And we can see the aircraft's flying over what looks like the jungles with a little bit of a road or perhaps a river running through there with some clouds in the background looking quite nice. The model itself looks a little bit basic, which it is, but at least it's quite honest on the box there. A little bit odd with the tail wheel down and the main landing gear obviously retracted, but oh well. Then we've got in the corner here the Hobby Boss logo, the titles of the aircraft, 1/72nd scale, some details about the dimensions of the kit, the little easy assembly authentic kit sticker which they put, or print that they put on the boxes for these easy assembly kits. It says here that ages 14 plus are what it recommends, and honestly I think that is way too high. As you'll see, you could definitely be a lot younger and still build this aircraft just fine. It says here, detailed scale kit for adult collectors to assemble. Again, would we say detailed and would we say it's just for adults? I would say it's not really necessarily those things. It could definitely be someone younger building this. My favourite thing that any model kit can have on the box: actual model may vary from image on box. Please keep the packaging since it contains important information, and as you'll see, that's referring to our instructions. And then this is in, I believe, Mandarin, so I don't really understand much of it. On the side here, we've got a few more bits of artwork. Again, it's the same Flying Tigers schemed P-40 flying with the looks like some mountains in the background, flying over some jungle, and another one with a bit more of a generic sky background. Here we've got a little bit of text talking about the history of the P-40. It doesn't look to me like it is very well translated, and it's a little bit all over the place, which is quite common with these kits. But it says basically the P-40E with a short nose, shortened landing gear, and armed with 6 0.5-inch wing machine guns, was used extensively as low-altitude close support fighter. Numerous units were exported to the Allied Air Forces, among which 1,500 units served the RAF as P-40E Kittyhawk Mark 1A. The British developed the Kittyhawk in northern Africa against the German Luftwaffe. So, yeah, a little bit iffy on the translation there, but you kind of get the general idea on what they're saying about this aircraft. Interestingly, they talk about the Royal Air Force, but it is not included, or none of the schemes in this kit are for the Royal Air Force. So a little bit odd that they talk about that in detail. I suspect it's because their other P-40 kit, the M version, does have Royal Air Force markings. But anyways, nothing really other than the repeats of the box art and a few pictures of the finished model. But it still looks quite nice, as you can see, with all the decals on it and built up. On the back here, we have the assembly instructions and a sprue map. So rather than having a piece of paper, instead you refer to the back of the box. And as you can see, you haven't really got too many sprues. You've got, looks like 3 sprues, plus the wings and the fuselage come molded as separate pieces, and then a clear sprue for the canopy, plus the decals. Assembly is pretty simple. The wings and underside of the fuselage are all basically one assembly, so you don't have to join any wing halves. You basically assemble a little mini cockpit. A little bit unusual for these kits to actually have any kind of detail in the cockpit, but it looks like we've got a little bulkhead there with the seat, plus a joystick and a little bit of molded detail on the floor, which looks quite decent for a very easy kit. Then you attach the cockpit assembly to the wing half before then putting the fuselage, which is one piece rather than 2 halves, on the top of that there. There's a few extra little accessories such as the exhausts, a gun sight, a little head cushion for the pilot, and you've also got your horizontal stabilizers, which it looks like you install one here, plus the canopy. Then you've got the landing gear, which is pretty easy. You've just got one wheel which gets attached to the struts on either side, and then you can attach that to the underside of the aircraft. You've got options for either a drop tank or the bombs, and there's the rack there. So they're both pretty easy to assemble, just 2 halves that you join and then attach to the rack. The propeller, I believe it will spin, but they don't seem to show it has a washer or anything, so it might not be We'll have to have a look at the actual parts, but it looks like you won't actually be able to spin the aircraft's propeller very easily. You're probably better to glue that in place. Otherwise, it's going to come off because there's no pin or washer holding it in. Got a little part here for the radiator details, the horizontal stabilizer and the exhausts for the other side, and then you've got a tail wheel, and that's pretty much it. You have a P-40 in 3 easy steps, so that's pretty simple, I reckon. Here we've got the painting guide, so you've actually got 2 schemes in this kit. You've got the one from the box art, the 16th Fighter Wing 23rd Fighter Group in 1942, and it's basically an olive drab neutral grey aircraft with some tan sprayed over the top of it, which is pretty typical for Pacific Theatre aircraft from the Army or US Army Air Forces. As you can see, you've got the sort of early star on it after they removed the red dot, but before they added the bars. And US Army on the underside there with the very nice and distinct jaws or teeth from the Flying Tigers group. As you can see, the colour guide is for Mr. Colour, and it's relatively easy to convert those from online references. There are a few typos here and there. As you can see, they've got dark green, whatever that is, and there's a few more typos here. For the second scheme, we have OARC Earth. I'm assuming that's Dark Earth. But basically, the second scheme is actually a Soviet one, so a lot of the P-40s, especially the E version that's included in this kit, got sent to the Russians under Lend-Lease. And this one's from 154th IAP 1942, which I believe was involved in the defense of Leningrad. So a pretty famous battle there, and it's basically in the same colours as the Royal Air Force Kittyhawks would have been, with the dark green and the brown sort of flat earth colours, and then a light blue or a neutral grey underside. I think it would depend on the factory and the history of each aircraft, but in this case it shows the light grey, so I'm assuming that's pretty similar to neutral grey. And basically it's got the red stars, and you've got a few kill counts next to the White 50 identification on it. So nice that they've got 2 different schemes from very different theatres of the war. Obviously there's so many P-40 schemes that you could do. I'm sure if you had some spare decals you could switch it over, but these are pretty cool ones to have out of the box. Something that's very iconic and famous, and then something that's a little bit more obscure. And as for the actual plastic parts, we'll open the box up and have a look at those in just a sec. I think Hobby Boss and also Trumpeter, which I believe is actually the same company, or if not, they're very similar. They seem to like doing a lot of packaging for, just a couple of sprues. You know, where a company like Airfix or Revell might just do one plastic bag with all the sprues in it, instead they do one plastic bag per sprue, plus there's all this foam, which means that you very rarely ever have any parts come off the sprue or get damaged. You can see with the single pieces like the fuselage, they've wrapped that in foam too, so it can take a little bit of pressure if the box did end up getting crushed somehow. Decals, which come in their own little bag there. Clear parts wrapped in this kind of foam, and I believe sometimes they're also in plastic, but in this case it might just be some foam. And then interestingly, the wings are like a regular kind of toy or something, are actually tied to this little piece of cardboard. So I'll untie these and have a little look at them first. So I finally untied the wing parts, and as you can see there's a fair bit of the bottom fuselage and the famous air intake from the P-40. And honestly, for a single piece, this is quite nicely detailed. On the upper surface you have recessed panel lines, and as you can see they're relatively shallow and thin, but probably quite accurate for the scale, honestly. And they've done a very nice job with some raised ribbing for the fabric textures there. Pitot tube is moulded in, and it actually has a little bit of detail on it, which doesn't look too bad at all. Machine guns are also moulded in as extra pieces there, looking quite good. Raised bit here for the formation light at the tip of the wing, which looks quite good. More recessed details all along the entire wing, and the ailerons are nicely recessed in there as well. Then on the fuselage half, you've got a few little rivets. Looks like they're relatively cleanly moulded. Not perfect, but given the fact that they've done it in one piece, it's pretty impressive in my opinion. A little bit more recessed detail around the air scoop. There's a fair bit of flashing that will need to be cleaned up around the air intake there, but if you look inside, you've actually got recessed details for the oil cooling system, which looks really quite nicely done. A little bit more flash on the top there, so that will have to get removed if you want the parts to fit nicely. And there is a little bit of a seam line running along the edge of the wings there. It's very subtle out here, but it is a little bit more prominent in here. On the underside, more recessed detail on the fuselage. Also recessed detail with a little bit of raised detail where appropriate for the ammunition access hatches there. They've recessed all of the ejector ports for the shells. They've done a few little rivets, and again, fabric texturing and the landing lights there look really quite nicely done. Same on this side as well, very similar details. They've actually done a little bit of the ribbing inside of the wings for the landing gear bay molded in, which really is quite fantastic that they've done that. A little bit more recessed detail, you can see some more rivets coming out where the wings join the fuselage, all looking quite nice there. The landing gear bays are, or the flaps for them are actually molded to this piece, and they're in the open position. So if you wanted to do this this kit with the landing gear retracted, you'd have to do a fair bit of modifying. But for just out of the box on its landing gear, that's pretty nice and very, very simple. You don't have to fiddle around with those pieces. And as you can see, there's some quite large holes for the fuel tanks and the radiator and landing gear to join to, so they're going to be pretty solid. And on the upper surface, there's a few guide pins to help you line it up with the fuselage. Speaking of which, the fuselage comes in its own bag with, as I've said, a fair bit of foam around it. So I'll open this up. It's kind of nice that they've actually done that extra foam. I know that's a little bit more waste and rubbish, but maybe you can put it to good use. I'll probably be using it personally for some packaging for selling eBay stuff. But anyways, it kind of protects the antenna, which has survived. And yeah, for a single molded piece, this is pretty nice. Again, it's all recessed details, nice and subtle, so not too exaggerated. Very nice job doing all the rivets for the access hatches around the engine there. A little bit of detail for the interior of the cockpit there with the ribbing. More recessed panel lines all the way along here. Again, nice job with the fabric texture on the tail and some nice little raised details where appropriate. The doors for the tail wheel bay are molded again in the open position, so you'd have to cut them away and do a bit of modifying if you wanted to have the landing gear retracted for this part as well. You've got a little bit of a sort of pin sticking out for the propeller to sit on. I don't know if there's a washer included in this kit, but if there is, you should be able to assemble the propeller so it will spin. Otherwise, you can just glue it into place like the box instructions say so. No real detail for the cockpit, it's sort of just a blank wall. They have done the area where the instrument panel would be, and there's a little hole for the gun sight to fit to and the seat headrest to go on, but otherwise nothing too much. There is a bit of a seam line running along the center of the aircraft there from the molding process, but other than that, pretty nicely done. Maybe a tiny bit of flash around the edges here of the tail, but nothing that a little bit of sanding can't fix. So yeah, that looks pretty good. Again, for a single molded piece, not bad at all. So we've got 3 separate bags for the other 3 sprues. This one's pretty small. It only contains the wheels there, which have some pretty nice raised details for the rivets and a little bit of a recessed line for the tyre hub. But not too much detail on the wheel itself. There's no tyre pattern or anything like that. Here we've got the exhausts, which are pretty finely moulded actually. They look quite nice. This looks like the bulkhead for the cockpit area, which is a pretty simple piece. And then you've also got the headrest. Again, a pretty simple part, but yeah, they've done a little bit of raised detailing on it. This sprue here has a fair bit of padding on it, so we'll have to remove that to see what we've got. Looks like, there we go, that's to protect the cockpit floor. So we've got one of our elevators there. Again, same story as the rest of the aircraft. Recessed details for all the panel lines, but some very nice ribbing details for the fabric control surfaces. Here we've got our optional drop tank, which is pretty basically detailed, but there is a raised little circle there for the filler cap, which looks pretty nice. Landing gear strut for one side looks really good. They've done a little bit of detail on it. We'll need a little bit of cleanup. There's a bit of flash here and there. But it's got pretty solid attachment points, so it should make a pretty nice tough set of landing gear, which is good. Here we've got one of the hard points to attach either the drop tank or the bombs, which I believe it will go up into the fuselage that way. So yeah, not too much detail on that, but it looks like it's pretty cleanly molded. Not sure what this is. I think that's just an ejector pin mark. But that's your gun sight, which has a little bit of detail on it, which doesn't look too bad at all, although it will need a bit of cleanup because there is a bit of a nasty seam line on it. Here we've got the seat, which looks pretty accurate for a P-40. Basic, but yeah, definitely the right kind of shape and size. Here, again, another ejector port. Oh, that's a bit of hair. Here we've got another ejector pin mark kind of thing. We've got a tail wheel, which looks pretty nicely detailed. A little bit basic on the actual tire itself, but they have done a raised and recessed areas on the joints there that hold it to the fuselage, which looks good. Here we've got the cockpit floor, and they've actually attempted to do a little bit of detail in it, which isn't, it's basic, but oh well, it's not too bad. You've got a little area for the seat and the rear bulkhead to attach to, and then you've got some raised details for the control linkages where the joystick goes. They've also done the little wobble pump that's pretty iconic for the P-40 right next to the control stick, which is very, very basic. It's sort of just a little thing that points up, whereas the wobble pump sort of has a round ball kind of handle that you can grab. But yeah, not too bad. Pretty funny that they've included it. Very much an iconic P-40 feature in my opinion. Then you've got very basic squares for the rudder pedals, but you probably won't see too much of those down there anyways. Here we've got a little pin, so it looks like if you did want to make your propeller spin, you could put the base part on and then stick that pin over the top, and it would fit in nicely there and hold the propeller so it will still rotate. It looks like another set of drop tank parts. Perhaps it's for a different tooling or something. I believe the instructions call for C1 and C2, so that would be these two. Not sure what number 10 is for. Perhaps it's for a different kit, or maybe it's for the bomb. So yeah, that's a bit odd that they've included an extra drop tank or bomb holder for the underside hard points, but oh well, for whatever reason we've got an extra one there. And here we have the last set of grey sprues, and as you can see, not too many parts again on this one. So we've got a few little bits and pieces here. We've got the propeller, which looks quite nicely done. There's not too much flashing. There does seem to be a little bit of a weird kind of warping bend to them that doesn't quite look right. Here we've got the base for the propeller hub, so that would slot directly onto the spinner area like so, and then you could put that washer in place as I've mentioned. Then you've got the actual cover for the spinner, the cowling piece that goes over the top, so that looks quite nice. They've done a bit of recessed detail for one of the joints along there, which looks good. Pretty basic little joystick, although it does have the right shaping for a P-40 with the sort of bend in it and the little notch at the top there, which looks basic but quite a decent little placeholder anyways. Here we have the cow flaps, and as you can see there's a little bit of a recess for the individual flaps, which looks quite nice. It's a little bit thick, but not too bad honestly for a basic little kit. Another elevator, or horizontal stabilizer I should say, with the same kind of details. Here we've got the bomb, so very similar to the drop tanks. As you can see there is a little bit of nasty flash in some of those spots there, but honestly not too bad, pretty basic little part anyways. We've got yet another drop tank holder, or a hard point, so not too sure why we've got a set of two. I suspect what it is it's something to do with either this being the same parts used for another tooling of this kit, so maybe the later model P-40M Hawk has that type. But for whatever reason you've got a spare one, so I suppose if you break one at least you've got a spare. Another set of landing gear struts, and then there's this weird thing. I have absolutely no idea what these two are. I can't see any mentioning of them in the instructions. Perhaps it's some sort of jig or something, but yeah, not really too sure about this one. Perhaps someone in the comment section can put some light onto what the hell that thing is, but oh well, you've got a spare rectangle with several little circles and weird keyed shape thingies sticking out of it. Yay. So the last sprue that we've got is the clear ones, which as you can see are very nicely... Oh boy, I hope that didn't break them. Okay, so the clear parts, they seem to have survived their fall, ironically after they were removed from the protective packaging. And as you can see, the quality on them isn't the absolute best. There is a fair bit of distortion due to the curved shapes and the plastic being really quite thick. But they've done an interesting approach of having the side windows on the P-40 molded to the main canopy frame. Most manufacturers will do that as three separate pieces rather than try and do it all in one. But yeah, there's some raised panel lines for the framework, which look quite nice, especially on the rear section there. They're quite pronounced, which looks accurate. Otherwise, though, yeah, pretty basic clear parts. Maybe not the best. You might want to replace them if you're wanting something a bit more serious. But honestly, given the rest of the cockpit being quite basic, that's probably okay. And finally, the last thing we had to look at in this kit are the decals. So I'll open these ones up. I might use a knife to open these a little bit more easily. So as well as being in the plastic bag, there's also a little bit of tape holding the sort of film or piece of paper over the top of them. So just got to be careful not to get that tape accidentally on the decals, otherwise it will probably damage them. But as you can see, quality on these decals is actually pretty nice. If I bring it nice and close, you can relatively easily read that small writing. And yeah, the colours look quite accurate and nice. All those fine details like the little Hamilton standard logos on the props, or they might have been, no, they would have been Curtis, right, I think. But yeah, they've got the little symbol there on the, yeah, that's Curtis's symbol, sorry. Some pretty nice US Army roundels. The Red Air Force ones look pretty good. They've done the sort of first aid kit and moulded that all as one, or they've printed the first aid information and that little bit of text as part of the main decals to make things a little bit easier, so there's not too many to handle. There is a little bit of a funny kind of film texture on the decals, but they otherwise look pretty nice. The teeth look pretty good there. And as you can see, the rather polite artwork for the tail of the American P-40 with the, I think it's a Chinese man peeing on a Japanese flag. Very classy, looks pretty good, nicely nicely done. I can see why I believe they censored the art on the front. You can see the little figure, but you can't see the flag. But yeah, so it's a bit odd. I don't think Japan still uses that flag, but I suppose it is a little bit disrespectful. But it's definitely got a lot of character, which I think is quite a good statement for the P-40. So, as for the quality of these decals from my personal use, it's been quite a while since I've done a Hobby Boss kit. So I don't remember there being any issues with the decals, so that might be something I find out if I use them a little bit later. Although I probably won't be using any of these main roundels for this kit, because I will be most likely using this aircraft for a film project, which will mean I'll be doing it up in Royal Australian Air Force, either 75 or 76 Squadron, depending on the aircraft. Which I'll talk about in a sec. So on one hand, this kit is definitely not the most detailed 1/72nd P-40, and personally I think the Academy kit is a much better kit, even though it is a little bit of an older one. It's fun to build and it's got more detail. But if you're looking for a kit to start out with, this is a pretty decent one. It's nice and easy to assemble and relatively simple. It requires a little bit of cleanup in terms of sanding and seam lines and that sort of thing, but it's a good practice, and it's also pretty cheap. As you can see, I got this one from Hobbyrama down in Brisbane, which isn't too far away from me, for about $13, which is about half the price of most other 1/72nd scale single-engine warbirds like this one, so pretty good. If you're after something like a paint mule or just to test out new techniques, these are nice and cheap, so they're a pretty good option for that kind of thing. I have actually got two of these, and the reason is because I'm putting together a stop motion I've been talking about the Battle of Milne Bay, so I needed a fairly decent number of P-40s, or at least I wanted a decent number of P-40s, so I figured I'd buy a couple of these ones because they're nice and cheap, and they'll do good enough for background aircraft that are a little bit further away from the camera, maybe even some close-ups, because honestly it's not too bad a detailed kit. It's just kind of the cockpit that lets it down. And that's one point I want to mention. I don't know why, but with Hobby Boss, I mean, they tend to leave out most of the cockpits. I've previously looked at a Hobby Boss Heinkel 162 Salamander, and it had a lot less sort of stuff in the cockpit. And I've also built a Grumman FM1 Wildcat from them, and it too didn't have much in the cockpit. This P-40 actually seems to have a decent amount. There's a seat, there's a control column, a few other little accessories. What I don't get is why all of these starter sets seem to not have an instrument panel. It's one extra piece and one decal. I think most beginners can handle that, and I don't see why that would be too expensive or complicated to add to these kits, and it would make a pretty big difference, I think, when you've got large canopy sections like that. I think the 162 was a lot simpler on the inside, so I can understand that, but with this P-40, I mean, and also the Grumman, they bothered with gun sights and seats. Why the hell can't we have an instrument panel? And Airfix did this too with their BF-109 set, which I've also done an inbox review on. Left out the instrument panel. All it would have taken was one piece and one decal, which, yeah, I don't get it. I don't know why starter sets don't have instrument panels, or at least some of the more recent ones seem to. But for whatever reason, that's apparently too difficult for a beginner, so they've left it out. I've got a few decals for P-40 instrument panels, so I'll probably just slap one on a little piece of plastic card and insert that into the cockpit. But yeah, that's for when I get around to building this one, which may be a little while because there's a few other projects backing things up. So definitely let me know if you want to see that in the future in the comment section. Otherwise, I might just build it off camera for my own purposes. But anyways, that's it for this video. I do hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it. If you did, please be sure to leave a like, and also subscribe to the channel if you want to see more and really help things out. A big shout out, as always, to my wonderful patrons for helping me fund the money to buy these kits and keep the channel going. It wouldn't be possible without you guys. And yeah, once again, thanks for watching, and until the next video, take care and model on.